If you had to say, like, for now, and I'm not just talking about on the field, like I'm also referring to roster construction and everything. We're like a year and a half post that Nick Saban retiring and Kalen DeBoer hiring. How would you assess the job that you think he's done to this point? And like I said, I'm not just saying on the field. Obviously, some people can have thoughts on that. But how he's built the roster, how he's retained, coaches, even bringing back Ryan Grubb. Like, what do you think about kind of how that looks?
Yeah, I think in some ways he's done fine. In other ways, there's much to be desired. I don't think it's a secret that they did not handle success well a season ago, right? Where they had these big wins, and then the following week they would follow it up with a loss or a poor performance. So they've got to get that ironed out. Now, I do think that Kalen can operate in ways this season that he couldn't a year ago, in the sense of he can maybe use a different tactic of just handling players because a year ago he was just trying to keep a roster together more than anything and trying to keep guys from leaving more than at any point because they'd not committed to play for him, or most of them had.
Mhm.
So much of it was just about keeping the fabric in place and not being a massive disruptor to what kind of they had before. But now he can kind of run the program the way he wants, maybe rule with a little tougher fist, so to speak, than I think he could have a year ago, frankly. And that doesn't mean he's going to turn into Nick Saban all of a sudden, maybe in terms of the iron fist that Nick Saban rolled with. But I think he can be a bit more firm and a bit stricter, frankly, in year two when these guys did come to play for him, and he's not just trying to keep this patchwork roster together. So, yeah, I think that there's much to be desired from what they did a year ago. It wasn't good enough, and I think it will be a failure if they miss the college football playoff this year. But I think they'll make it. I really do think this is going to be a good football team, and it could be a great football team if Ty Simpson plays well at quarterback or whoever plays quarterback. But right now, he's the leader of the clubhouse. So I think they're going to be fine. And I think that year two for DeBoer is often a really good year. And there's no reason to believe it won't be this year too. But if it's not a good year, then things are going to get real tough in Tuscaloosa.
And you actually just led into kind of the thing that I was going to ask about, right? Like, I thought that last year, again, like the positives and negatives, people on this show have heard me talk about the fact that the players had just committed to play for DeBoer just one time, right? You believed him post Saban, but at this point, players have committed to play for DeBoer on 2 and 3 occasions that they could have entered the transfer portal. I think it says a lot about the team that you didn't have anybody enter in the spring transfer portal window. That means that every person that had that ability said, "Oh no, I still want to play for DeBoer. I still want to play for this staff, etc." Right? So I think that there's value in that. But in my thoughts, I think that a playoff has to be the bare minimum goal for next season for Alabama football, because I think that when you look back at what Saban did, people are always going to point. And again, I said this before: if you're looking to, replace DeBoer with, or replace Saban with Saban, so did everyone else. That's the reason why every SEC coach got fired while Saban was the coach, right? But the question becomes, like, Saban would have made the playoff every year, and that's something that fans will point to if he misses it again. So, like, is the playoff the goal at the end of the day? That, like, if you don't make that, has to be the bare minimum floor for next season. You have to make the 12-team playoff, or do you think that the goal needs to be, you need to make the SEC championship game? Like, what would your say, like, again, floor goal for next year's team? Not what you think they can achieve, right? Because can achieve, I think they have the talent to win the title, right? Whether they will or not, it's a whole different question. But I'm talking about pure, like, hey, this is what they should be able to minimum do.
College football playoff. I mean, if they don't make it, then I think they messed up big time. They've got the roster to make it, so they should make it. But doesn't mean they will. There's enough parity in college football. Now, I don't think that that means, say, if they don't make the playoff, that DeBoer would get fired. That's not what I'm saying. I just think that they're in a real tough spot, and the scrutiny is just going to increase tenfold. Frankly, I don't think he gets fired for the big reason being he's still got a massive buyout. So, yeah, it's at a point where they need to make the playoff. Otherwise, there are going to be a lot of people who are really upset. There were people who were really upset when he didn't make the playoff in year one. He literally had, I think, the second best uh, win total for a first year coach at Alabama ever. Now, of course, he was following up Nick Saban, but I will contest that the roster he had is not as good as some people would make you think he had. It was good. Don't get me wrong, but they lost Caleb Downs, who was arguably the best player coming back on the roster. He's one of the best players in the country. And there's some evals that the staff might have missed on at times for some of the recruits they had. So it's not like Nick Saban handed them the 2020 roster and they didn't make the playoff with the 2020 roster. It wasn't that good. I mean, even Nick Saban, I know the assumption is that he would have made the playoff every year, and he probably would have in terms of this past year because he was really good. One of his best talents was getting his guys to play consistently week in, week out. They did not have those letdown games, not very often at least. And that was this team's biggest issue. But people, I think, compare Kalen, they compare just these Alabama teams to what the height of Nick Saban's dynasty was. And the reality is that Nick Saban's last few years were not as good. If people were honest about it, I mean, they still did well by most team standards, but they weren't the dynasty level of good where they just beat everyone badly. It's tough in this new era of NIL. The talent is more spread out. And I think that Nick Saban was finding that out. So Nick Saban won in a different era of college football that even if Nick Saban were still the head coach of Alabama, he would not be winning at the same level that he did. I truly believe that. And that's not a shot at Nick Saban. It's just the reality of college football now, where it's really hard to pull all the talent into one pool, like or into five pools, kind of thing, in terms of the top five teams or so. So I don't even remember what your question was, Owen, but you just got me going talking about Nick Saban. The floor of this team. I think it really is the playoff, and if they don't make the playoff, then they messed up.